My name is Eamonn Butler, and I'm author of Adam Smith, A Primer, which has been published by the Institute of Economic Affairs. Adam Smith was an 18th century economist. He lived in Scotland, and really he's important because he is the first person to understand the mechanics and the importance of the modern market economy, the exchange economy, the free economy as we call it. He was the first person really to see that when people exchanged goods or when countries traded, both sides actually benefited. Until then, people had thought that in order to make yourself better off, you had to make somebody else worse off. And international trade was really a matter of trying to impoverish all the other countries that you had anything to do with in order to try to get gold and silver back into your own vaults. And Smith realized that that was a mistake, and that we actually benefit both of our parties if we actually trade together, and you give me something which you don't value very highly but I do, and I give something which I've got plenty of but you're short of. That was his great book, which is called The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, and that really ushered in a new thinking about economics. And it ushered in a great era of free trade and competition, which culminated in the huge boom of the 19th century in both America and Europe. And he recognized as well that trade needs freedom, that if you're forced into trade, that's no good at all. You don't necessarily benefit from that if you've got no option. But if you trade with people freely, and you don't have to, you can go somewhere else and buy off somebody else, sell to somebody else, then the only reason that you engage in trade at all is because you will benefit from it. And both sides go into the trade with the hope and expectation that they will actually benefit from this exchange. And Smith was also one of the first people to realize that the free society, one that's not ordered and bossed around by kings and ministers, that the free society is not anarchy. There is actually an order in a free society, that somehow there is what he called an invisible hand, which seems to produce a good beneficial outcome, even though there's no king or minister telling us how to run our lives. And that the free society, free trade, free exchange, all of these things contributed to the general good. My book looks at several of Adam Smith's writings, tries to explain his main ideas in very simple language, and the first of those major works is The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776. He starts it talking about what he calls the division of labour. He says that if you wanted to make a pin, it would take you maybe a year, possibly longer. You would have to discover the iron ore, you'd have to mine it, you'd have to smelt it, you would have to draw it into a wire, you would have to sharpen the end, you would have to put a pin head on the pin, you'd have to put it in a box. All of these things are specialist tasks in the market economy, though. There's one person who draws the wire, another person who puts the head on the pin, another person who sharpens it. And each of those can have their own specialist skills, so that they can do the job very much more efficiently. And 10 people or so, he says, in a pin factory can produce thousands and thousands of pins in a single day, whereas you or I, trying to do it on our own, would hardly produce one in a year. So he says that this division of labour, this specialisation, is extremely important in raising the productivity of the economy. And of course it implies exchange, that one person is very good at producing pins, but another might be very good at brewing beer or baking bread, and so they trade and exchange these goods one for the other, so that each of them is better off because they're all specialists and they're all doing their bit of the job very efficiently. And when we trade in that way, we generate wealth. And Smith was really the first economist to realize that the measure of wealth is gross national product, what he calls the product of the nation. And it's only growth in the gross national product that will boost wages, And what we need to do to maximise that really is to get government and regulation out of the way. There's nothing worse, he thinks, than kings and ministers trying to tell people how to run business, and he thinks that once you get rid of a lot of that regulation, then you will have a much more efficient economy, and we'll all be better off, and the whole world, as it trades one nation among another, will be better off. In this exchange economy, another great efficiency is, of course, that you can have specialist tools, that there's no point in somebody trying to acquire very complicated pieces of machinery just to produce, say, clothes for themselves or food for themselves. But if they're producing it for tens or thousands of people, then it's worthwhile to have specialist equipment. And that, of course, means that the economy can be much more efficient yet again, because you've got the specialist tools for the job. But he's very insistent, Adam Smith, that this free market economy in which we specialise in what we do well and we trade among each other, it does need a rule of law. You need some basic rules, and one of those must be that people's property is secure. And it needs principles of defence and justice, and it even needs some infrastructure to make sure that the trade can go ahead. So these then are the principles that we find in the Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith's great book, pioneering book which influenced economic policy and indeed social policy in Britain and in America and many other countries, and really changed the shape of the world, and ushered in the free market economy which has spread so widely through the world today. In Smith's time, the society was beginning to open up. We had world trade, and people were going off to exciting exotic places, and they were picking up new ideas and picking up indeed new goods. And so he could see the benefits of that, which I think people in earlier centuries probably couldn't see so easily. And he realized that all this international trade meant that both we and the people that we're trading with actually benefited from the deal. So he thought that we'd got it wrong. The old idea was wrong, that we only gain if we can make our trading partners worse off. And he realized that both sides gained. So I think that was quite important. And also there was a lot of thought in the 18th century about mankind and our place in society, and really people were coming up with, if you like, evolutionary models of society. Let's see what works, and somehow our human nature has left us with ways of working, ways of acting in which seem to produce a beneficial overall order. And that's Adam Smith's idea of the invisible hand. So that was new in thinking as well. And of course it was a great era of personal freedom was starting to come in. People were better educated, they were writing, so there was a market for these sorts of goods, these sorts of ideas. And of course you had America, which was facing a revolution at the time, so there was lots of thinking about political and economic ideas at that time, so it was a very, very good time to be writing about these things. What people sometimes forget today, because they read The Wealth of Nations and it's written in very 18th century language, it's very ponderous. That's really one of the reasons why I wrote my book, because I think people start it and they don't finish it because they can't really get through this maze of detail that Adam Smith has. And people today think of it as being a very academic book, but at the time it was a very political book. Adam Smith was a good academic, that's true. And he did important work on philosophy and ethics, but he was also actually a politician. And The Wealth of Nations is a political book in that sense. It was meant to change the existing order, that he thought that economic policy and trade policy was simply wrong, and that we needed to change that. And the only thing that we should do is to get government out of the way and to have a free economy and let people trade freely, and then we'd all be better off. So that message was taken up by the politicians, and the politicians of the day bought and read his book in very large numbers. It was extremely influential, and before long his ideas were being implemented, and he found himself advising the government in Britain and helping to bring his own ideas for tax simplification and lower taxes and a freer trade, to bring these into fruition. In writing The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith spent some years in London, where he met many of the leading intellectuals on the London circuit, and also, of course, he did the grand tour of Europe. He was appointed a tutor to the young Duke of Buccleuch, and what you did with young noblemen in those days, if you were a tutor, is you took them around Europe, and Smith did that, where he was able to meet Voltaire and all the leading French economists and pick up ideas from all over Europe. I think Adam Smith is sort of taken for granted by academics, which is a shame, because sometimes they're taken for granted so much that they forget his basic principles, and they assume that the only way to run an economy is to control it somehow from the top, and Smith tells us exactly the opposite. But there is, interestingly, a growing interest in Adam Smith and what he said. He's popping up all over the place these days, and I think politicians realise the importance of free trade. There are world free trade discussions going on all of the time. They realise the importance of having a relatively free economy, because you have competition now on a much bigger scale throughout the world in a globalised economy, and people are starting to realise that the old top-down, regulated, controlled economy is not very effective at keeping your head above water when you've got that kind of competition. So I think there's much more interest in Adam Smith. I think academics are always about 20 years behind the times, so they'll catch up sooner or later. Smith is both an economist and a philosopher. He wrote a very important work in philosophy, which is called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, where he's saying, it's a sort of evolutionary view, he's saying that nature has endowed us with ways of cooperating, collaborating together, that really we would call ethical, and that works, and that's why it continues. Darwin was 100 years later, but it is beginning to grope towards an evolutionary theory of society. So that was a very, very important contribution to the debate, because everybody was speculating at the time, well, what is it that is good? What is good action? What is good values, and so on? And Smith was able to say, well, actually, it's pretty well what nature has endowed us with, and it's what seems to work. So that's his great contribution to philosophy. But also in terms of economics, people think that, well, Smith, founder, father, if you like, of market economics. That means it's everybody's out for what they can get. It's devil take the hindmost, the economy redding tooth and claw. Smith didn't think any of that at all. He was a very humane man, and he believed in the market economy for the same reasons that I did, because I think it's the best way of actually helping the poor. That giving them access to the same trade and exchanges that the rich have is the best way to run things. The old way is that the government grants monopolies to its friends and chums, and that doesn't do poor people any good at all. But in a free economy, through hard work and a little luck, you can actually rise and prosper, however humbly you've been born, and we've seen that hundreds of thousands of times. So yes, it's a very humane kind of philosophy which seeped through the foundations of this great book.